Welcome. Scott here. Here is a quick boss guide for the upcoming Heretics event for Blue Pulse Heretics, which is also known as Flumen Draco Heretics. The synergy units for the event are Fujin, Caius, Cid Highwind and Gabranth. The featured units will be getting their force enhancement boards unlocked. Fujin FR will be making their debut. Fujin and Caius will be getting their C90 awakening and reworks. We will be fighting two Flumen Draco. They have 90 million HP. The turn requirement is 90. The HP requirements is 10,000. Before I continue further, here is a small disclaimer clause for the video. The guide is written based on the time that the event was released for the Japanese version. Please do note that it is possible that the boss fight mechanics might differ when the actual event is released in global. As we are no longer have Lufania Plus fights, the boss guide will be focused primarily on Shinryu fights. In Shinryu, you need to understand the effects gained by the boss as the force gauge build up, its force ability and its force time effect. As your party has low force levels at the start of the era, it is highly certain that the boss force gauge will build up faster than yours. To have a better understanding on the basics of the force gauge mechanics and Shinryu fights, I have done a video explaining the mechanics. I have included the link to the video under the comments and video description for your quick reference. For this fight, the boss force gauge is broken into 3 thresholds. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 40%, the boss will gain a Post Turn BRV Regen that is 110% of its initial brave. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 60%, in addition to the Post Turn BRV Regen, the boss will gain additional brave damage resistance of 50% against non-wind elemental attacks. When the boss gauge is more or equal to 80%, the boss will have a Post Turn BRV Regen and the brave damage resistance will increase to 90% against non-wind elemental attacks. The boss force gauge will build up faster as its HP is lowered. You can refer to the table on the screen for the percentages. The boss has a massive HP pool. Fortunately, the boss has a predictable moveset. The aura will reduce your damage output if you don't deal wind elemental damage. As long as you have a constant source of wind enchant, you will be fine for the fight. At the 100% threshold, the boss will use its force ability, Draco Tornado, and activates its force time for 5 turns. The boss force ability, Draco Tornado, will result the boss recover from brave gain of 100% of its initial brave, followed by a guaranteed hit, AoE HP attack. Upon using the force ability, the boss will enter into its force time where the gauge will start to emit a red hue with counter of 5 on its gauge. When the force time is activated, the bosses will gain HP damage up boost of 50%. Its brave cannot drop below 20% of its max brave. The boss becomes immune to break. Lower its max brave holds the key to control its damage output. To freeze the enemy's force time, you need to use a wind elemental force ability. You can use a non-elemental FR like Gabranth with a wind enchant call like Fujin, Bartz, Alisai, or Cid Highwind. Now let's proceed with some party setup recommendations. Recommended calls abilities. To ensure that you are able to constantly break them, it is important to inflict defense down debuffs. Example of calls abilities that inflict defense down calls are Ferris, Titus, Jack, and Vanille. To speed up the fight, using HP damage up debuff calls like Karasame, Seymour, Fran, Ignis, Lily-Set, Maria, and Dark Knight Cecil are useful. Although a bit trickier to use, Aura type HP damage up calls like Kumari, Alisai, Priyash, Leo and Locke are also viable. Most recently C90 units have Aura type HP damage up bonuses. You can use Dissidia DB Call Finder to find out more. As the boss gauge builds up, field effects that reduces brave damage from non-wind elemental attacks will be applied. Hence, it is important to enchant your party with wind elemental units. You can make use of wind enchant calls like Alisai, Bartz, Fujin, or Cid Highwind. With the exception of Fujin calls, the others will only enchant the caller. Next, I will be covering units that will be useful to handle the fight mechanics. For any endgame fights like Lufenia and Shinryu, it is always recommended to bring supports for their aura and buffs. You can consider bringing Selpha, Lena, Ishtala, Yuna, Garnet, Horam, Rem, and Ramza. Selpha can make your party hit hard with her guaranteed launch debuff, while Lena can ensure your party is always safe with her powerful HP regen buffs. The boss doesn't have a lot of HP attacks, but it can be very dangerous with its headbutt attack due to its massive max brave pool and post turn BRV Regen. It is advisable to bring a damage mitigator if you doing a hit and counter run. You can consider Leela, Beatrix, Snow, Zack, Edge, Warrior of Light, Orin, and Golov. Evasion tanks like Leela, Golov, or Edge are great here, as most of the boss attacks are non-guaranteed hit. To avoid your damage being resistance, it is advisable to bring wind elemental units or use an wind enchant call on an off-turn damage unit like Kain, Freya, or Sisnei. Wind elemental units like Maria, Cypher, Sabin, Shantato, Priyash and Vaughn offers good options for the fight. Other than Fujin, Bartz can enchant the party with wind element with his BT aura. Alisai is a premium damage up call that grants wind enchant to the caller. Optimal FR to use for this fight are Gabranth, Ursula, Fujin and Camlanot. If you fulfill the 3 conditions of Ice, Disable and Launch, you can nuke the boss down fast before it could pose any threat with Camlanot FR. Gabranth, the featured BT unit, has a wide arsenal of rebreak mechanics and a very strong BT aura. Ursula offers one of the strongest auxiliary FR and you gain to 999% with supercharging. Pair the supercharger with Kain firing lancets in the background and the bosses will be dead soon in no time. Fujin FR is underwhelming and offers conditions that with little benefits. However, Fujin has a very strong rework on her base kit that makes her relevant again in this era. Her skills have more brave hits and brave gain among brave hits. All her skills trigger launches and wind/do counter damage as well. As Shinryu is about building up your force gauge chargers units are great to deploy here. Characteristics of force charger are the unit have substantial amount of instant turn non-attacking abilities. At max force enhancement level 30, one such instant turn ability can supercharge the force gauge by a whopping 50%. You can easily amplify your force time damage by abusing the supercharging mechanics. Examples of such force gauge chargers units are Kryl, Braska, Pernello and Ignis. For other recommendations, you can consider the following. For tanks, you can bring Warrior of Light and Orin. Freya and Kain can offers off-turn damage and ensure your brave always retained at the start of the turn. For damage dealers, you can consider Caius, Terra, Machina, and Titus. Caius has gotten a very good rework that allows his EX and LD hit very hard on the bosses. If you are doing the hit and counter game, constant brave refunding and powerful defense boost are important. Rosa and Paladin Cecil offer powerful auras for the party. Cid Highwind has nice damage with his LD and delays with his hard-hitting EX launch is important here, so you can also consider bring Lael if you have him fully built. Caius is also a great auxiliary support for launch comps. On the screen, you will see a timeline showing the HP thresholds triggers that you need to watch out for. Like Lufenia, Shinryu fights also features aura boosts for the boss when their HP are depleted to a certain threshold. The stats boosts are triggered at the start of the fight and 79%. Like other Shinryu fights, the enemy's force gauge will charge faster as their HP depletes. As the enemy's force gauge reaches 40% and above, the boss will gain a post-turn BRV Regen. When the gauge is 60% and above, the boss will start to resist non-wind elemental attacks. Apply your wind enchant call during this phase to avoid your damage being hampered by the brave damage resistance. The boss force ability Draco Tornado is a brave gain, guaranteed hit, AoE HP attack. While in force time, the boss will gain additional HP damage bonus boost and its brave cannot drop below 20% of its max brave. Lower its max brave will help a lot here, otherwise the boss will most likely to spam headbutt attack. At the start and 79% HP threshold, the boss will trigger Rage Up, where it will initiate a Brave gain to fill up to its current max Brave. At the 49% HP threshold, it will activate a green aura where when your party members act, their turn will be delayed by 1. To remove the aura, you need to deal wind elemental damage to dispel it. The boss has a standard damage rotation cycle. It will start off with Bubble Out, Wing Dive and lastly Breath. Other than the Force ability, the other source of HP attack is its Headbutt attack. It will usually use it when its Brave is hot. Unlike the original Lufania fight in Desch Lost Chapter, the boss doesn't switch states between Physia and Magia. The mechanics of the fight is actually much simpler now. Overall, this fight isn't that difficult as long as you have units that can allow you to handle the mechanics. Evasion tanks like Leela, Golov, Edge, or 8 will have a nice field day in this battle. Counter units like Orin, Gladio, Kor, or Beatrix also works wonders here. If you have Camlanaut, Machina or Titus, you can easily nuke the boss HP down fast thanks to Camlanaut's broken FR mechanics. However, as the boss has a massive HP pool of 90 million each, do expect it to be a slugfest. Don't be surprised that you will need more than 2 FR phases to complete the fight. Now let's proceed with the boss mechanics proper. Similar to any Lufania fights, for SHINRYU fights, the boss will also gain stats boosts and Brave gain reduction auras when you deplete the boss's HP to a certain threshold. However, SHINRYU bosses will also gain HP damage reduction auras as well. The threshold's trigger for this fight is at the start of the fight and 79% HP threshold. At the start of the fight, it will boost its defense stats by 200%. It will raise its Brave damage and Brave gain reduction auras to 80%. It will also reduce your HP damage dealt by 50%. At 79% HP threshold, it will further boost its defense stats to 300% and the HP damage dealt reduction auras to 80%. To handle the defense stats boost, you can inflict defense down calls. To handle the Brave gain reductions, you can bring a Brave gain up support like Agrias, Ram, or Quistis. With the recent units released, you shouldn't have any problem in handling the Brave gain or damage reduction auras. For HP damage reduction auras, HP damage up calls will only partly offset against the reductions. However, you can easily overwrite them with your party force time. As we progress through the era, we will gain access to units with FR that allows you to build up your force time HP damage bonuses up to 999%. Learning on how to take full advantage of the damage window in SHINRYU fight holds the key on how to make SHINRYU fights easier. Now, I will be covering the boss key mechanics in detail. The boss will use Rage Up as it activates its aura boost at the start of the fight and 79% HP threshold. Rage Up will allow the boss to have massive Brave gain to its current max Brave. At the 49% HP threshold, the boss will activate a green aura with the Wind's Rage. While the aura is active, all party members' turn will be delayed by 1 after they act. This will affect all forms of action. You can dispel this aura by dealing wind elemental damage. I have listed down the wind elemental attacker units that you can consider along with the wind enchant calls. If you don't bring wind enchant calls or wind elemental unit, you can make use of Pandemonium Summon to dispel. Similar to the previous SHINRYU, the boss has a standard attack rotation as illustrated on the screen. Most of them are harmless. As long as you have your party guarded against those attacks, you will be fine. Similar to the recent Red Comet SHINRYU fight, the issue is actually not the fight mechanics but the massive HP pools along with the boss force gauge effects. I have come to the last slide of the guide. By now, you should have a FR. Generally, you just charge up your force gauge. Have the FR unit activate their force time with their force ability. Prepare for a big damage phase either through a unit burst phase or supercharge the gauge with Kane's follow-up. To build up the bonuses efficiently, you need bring a force gauge charger. Examples are Pernello, Kryle, Ignis or Braska. At force level 30, these units can boost the force charge with 50% with their instant turn, non-attacking ability on top of the force time conditions. If you bring Kane or using Kane BT friend as support, have him activate his BT aura and let him stay in the air firing the lancets while your force gauge charger is spamming his or her instant turns. If you have Camlanot fully built with FR and BT, you can abuse his powerful FR mechanics by fulfilling 3 of the following conditions. 1. Constant launches. Selfie LD debuff, Caius hero support or Cid Rain's LDCA on your burst unit. 2. Ice enchant. You can use Karasame LDCA for party ice enchant or bring an ice enchanter like Celis, Onion Knight, or Karasame himself. Snow also offers party-wide ice enchant with his BT aura. 3. Make sure you inflict a turn disable debuff on the boss. Camlanot BT is the easiest to set up. You can go through a setup process for this as well. When all conditions are met, the party can meet 80% HP damage bonus with a full party launch. Now let's recap on the boss key mechanics. The boss has a massive HP pool of 90 million HP each, which is 10 million more than the previous fight. So please do see this as a battle of attrition, not a battle that you can finish it down fast. Don't be surprised that you may need to use more than one FR to finish the fight. Launches, traps, off-turn damage and counters are essential things you need to utilize for the fight. Avoid trigger the force ability at the 79% HP threshold. Otherwise, the boss will use Rage Up followed by its force ability which will wipe out your party. The boss has a standard attack rotation cycle, Bubble Out, Wing Dive and Breath. Prepare your damage mitigation, trap, and counters to handle them and prevent the boss from gaining too much brave. When force gauge reaches 60% and above, this is time where you start to apply your wind enchant calls to avoid your brave damage being resistance. Fujin and Bartz are the only party members that offers party wind enchant. Bartz offers wind enchant with his BT aura. You can make use of wind enchant calls if you are not bringing them to the fight. Fujin call give you 3 turns of party wind enchant from her base and 6 turns of party wind enchant from her LDCA. The other calls only grant wind enchant to caller. Bart's base call gives 6 turns of self wind enchant while Elisai and Cid LDCA grants 3 turn self wind enchant. When the boss activates the green aura at the 49% HP threshold, you just need to deal wind elemental damage to dispel. Alternatively, you can use Pandemonium Summon to handle the mechanic. Lastly, don't be surprised with Fujin's rework. She is no longer a deadweight anymore and she will make this fight considerable easier. Finally, I will make a quick overview on the FR of featured unit, Fujin. This is one of the most difficult condition to fulfill FR. It is very reliant on Fujin. For the first condition, you will always meet the condition as Fujin offers wind enchant to the party. Do note that you cannot override non-wind elemental with wind enchant. For example, you cannot override Lulu's fire properties with her wind enchant. For the second condition, Fujin just need to do a launch. Turn manipulation or units that can give units lots of turns will help a lot to fulfill this condition. There will be units that will be released in the future that can help to showcase her strength. You can also abuse this FR by sending a party member away from the battlefield with Kane or Freya and have Fujin hog all turns. Overall, this FR is a restrictive one and you really need to give serious thoughts on building it unless Fujin is your favorite. Despite having a restrictive FR, I can say that Fujin base kit is worth some tickets if you don't have her. She offers the longest duration elemental enchant with her calls. It is also worth noting that wind isn't commonly resisted in the game. With this, I have come to the end of my boss guide presentation. Hopefully you find it useful. If you like the video, please give a like. Please subscribe to my channel for future gaming content. Good luck for the fight tomorrow. Bye.